Hi everyone, welcome to this full body action shot. My name is Alex and I'm using the Bakir character rig from Agora websites. I'm going to leave a link in the description to the rig. This video is all about body mechanics, how to set it up and take the scene to completion. There are two main principles of animation that we'll be using for this exercise: posing and timing. We'll talk about those as we block out the scene. Another important principle that is underrated is staging. We'll look at staging now as we set up the scene together. Here's what we have going on in the scene. We have Bakir and we have two platforms. One that he's standing on, and then this gap that he's going to jump over, and then this landing area. So that's what's going on in the scene. Nice and simple. Bakir, this rig is a new rig to me, so I'll be discovering it a little bit in this demonstration. Let's talk a little bit about staging now so we have a better idea what goes into it. To me, there are three aspects of staging. The first and the most common one is the relationship of objects to each other. So in this case, this character in relationship to this platform, in relationship to this other platform in the gap. Really, it's your character in relationship to the set and the main elements in that set. The other two aspects of staging that I've come to group all under staging is framing. Once we have the character in the right spot and we understand what the action is going to be, is we have to start to think about the different cameras we're going to place. Is it one camera, two cameras, five cameras? And are the cameras stationary or moving? We start to build a little blueprint in our mind of what the scene could be. So in this scene, I'm going to have Bakir antic back, take a big step forward, jump over this gap and roll. And I'm thinking 2 shots is what I need to tell the story. The first shot is going to be a full body, something where we can show off our action. He's going to exit screen. I might even pull the camera back a little bit, see the character, or I might even make it 3 shots. Just show the over the shoulder, show what's happening as an establishing shot. Cut to the front full body so we can see our action. I'll leave a little gap here so we understand he's jumping over. And then the third shot I'm thinking is nice on the other platform already. See the finishing of the action jumping through the air, landing, rolling, and ending up in a very nice close-up in the camera, and then taking off. Maybe 3 shots is what we'll do for this scene together. So we talked about 2 aspects of staging: the relationship of objects to each other, the framing, and the last aspect that I put under staging is composition. Once I've decided what the framing is and what I want to show and not show the viewer, I work within that framing now and compose different elements of the picture to direct the viewer's eye or to make things more clear. So composition to me also lands under the principle of staging. Let's start blocking out our scene. Before I do, note that I'm in the animation workspace. I find that very useful. I have my 3 windows, this left panel, this right one, and then the graph editor. Once you're in the animation workspace, if you don't see the graph editor, you can either Control Tab to swap between the dope sheet and the graph editor, or you can come to this corner and go graph editor. The timeline typically is like this, so I just pull it up. I'm not going to use the properties for now, so I'm just going to pull that this way. In the right panel here, what I like to do is just turn these things off. So I'm only focusing on the picture itself. And then on the left side, I'll turn everything on so I can work with my rig. I'm going to select the rig, Control Tab, takes me into pose mode, A to select all, and I'm going to frame for it. I've started with a very simple pose for our character, and basically he's just looking across the gap. Like I said before, I think the best framing, first shot, is just this over the shoulder. Something simple that allows everyone to understand what the scene's about. And it's about this character overlooking this gap. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that first camera, then work on the next camera and start blocking the scene. So actually, yeah, let's go out of pose mode. I'm going to go Shift A and let's create a camera. Camera. Over here in this window, I'm going to hit 0 on a numpad, and that takes us into this camera view. I'm just going to frame in a little bit. So I'm going to make my framing window larger. I'm going to hit N, this property under view, camera to view. I'm going to click that on. And now what I can do is frame out of this window. That's very powerful. Pull this properties a little bit. I have my camera selected. And under viewport display, this passport out, I'm going to just go 0.99. This allows us to focus in on our framing, yet still see elements of the set outside this framing area. What I like about framing in this window is I can select any object here, or even here. I just don't see it, but you can see I still select it. And then I can hit F to frame for it. Takes you right there nice and quick. For this first framing, all I'm thinking is screen direction and just trying to show things as clearly as possible. So screen direction is this character standing and I'm on the right side of this character. So when I cut, I'll still be on the right side of this character. This character is always going to be looking screen left to right. Doesn't matter if I'm in front or behind him, this character is always looking in that one screen direction. So I'll maintain that throughout. Okay, something like this. I can always change it after. Cool. I like that the character is in this nice negative space here, and I'm leaving a nice gap here for screen direction. I'm just going to go back to N, turn off this camera to view, so now I can't accidentally bump it. I can always go back with 0 on the numpad, and here's that camera. I'm going to select it. I'm going to go to frame 1, and I'm just thinking now how long this shot should be, and probably about a second, maybe a second and a bit. So a second's 24 frames, so let me give it a second and a third. So I'm going to go to frame 32, and I think that's a good amount of time. So I'm just going to hit I, and that sets a key. You saw that when I hit I don't get that menu, and how that happens is if I go over here, I have to be in object mode to do that. Go to Object, Animation, and change the key set. Once I do that, I can pick what I want, and I leave it at Location Rotation, and every time I hit I, it's always going to key those two things. So I select my camera, I hit I, sets a keyframe there. I'm also going to just key my focal length. I'm actually going to widen it out a little bit, 35. And by widening my lens, all I'm doing is making that gap feel wider, just with affecting that focal length. I'm going to have a little bit of a crane up move just to add a little bit of parallax. Parallax just helps to find different depths. So I'm going to hit N one more time, just come out of this framing window. Let's hit I to update that location rotation, perfect. Let's come over to our next frame, frame 33, and let's already frame for the next shot. So I'm going to select that character, hit F, and I'm going to frame for that character. Nice hero upshot. I do want to see the foot plants, so I'm not going to be underneath that platform so I can't see anything. I like seeing a little bit of the gap there. And what this character is, I'm going to, over the cut, I'm going to move this character a little bit more screen left so I have more distance to play with here. I'm leaving enough gap here so we can show that jump out of frame. I'm going to hit N one more time, get out of this camera view. So again, now I can't bump the camera. Select the camera, and you can select the camera from the view or from your outliner here. Cool. Hit I to insert a key. You saw that update here. And let's adjust our end framing for now. I'll just make it 60 frames. And without having laid a key on our character, or at least any animation, let's see if the story's communicating. So we have that first shot, we have the second shot. Cool. So I like it. I think what I'll do is I'll actually frame a little tighter on this first shot there. So then when we come to the second shot, it's a little wider. The contrast is greater. So that's the only change I'll make. I'm going to select the camera. I'm just going to actually, increase that focal length a little bit. Not much. Just cutting off the body a little bit. Awesome. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of a camera move, and then we can start blocking our character. I to insert a key, coming over here, frame 32, and I'm just going to pull it up just a little bit. Insert a key, and I'm also going to pan down while I crane up. Just a little bit. Insert a key, I might go back to the beginning and also just pushing closer to our character. So what that camera move is doing is not only craning up and panning down, but I'm also pulling out. Adding more than one direction on a camera move can help with depth. So that's what I'm doing there by pulling that camera back as well. With the camera selected, I'm going to hit A, select my keyframes, period numpad, just frame for it. A to select all my keyframes in here. And I'm going to go V and make that vector, make that linear. So let's go ahead and watch that now. Cool. So we see the gap a little more, and it could probably use another 8 frames. Just so the shot doesn't cut too quickly, but I'll leave it for now. Let's start blocking our character. I'm going to select the rig, Control Tab. I'm in pose mode now. A to select all. So when we cut to a new shot, typically you want to give about 8 frames, 1/3 of a second, just so the viewer has enough time to gather new information, and then we can start presenting additional information on top of that. So we cut to this new shot on frame 33 here. I'm going to give 6 to 8 frames of nothing. There might be a little camera drift or whatever, but in terms of movement on the character, I'm going to give a little pause and then start my animation. Okay, so I'm going to start maybe on frame 39. I'm going to lay a key there. I to insert a key. Okay, I've selected the character's Rudolph. I'm just going to pull him back a little and maybe a little more screen left. Really giving myself more screen real estate to play with. And I might have a little bit of a camera pull out, maybe a pan as the action happens. I'm not sure yet. But just giving myself enough distance here that I can imagine a little antic back, kind of a big little leap forward, a big anticipation here, and then that stretch forward. Insert a key, and let's start posing. So I'm going to go to frame 39, insert a key again. So all this is frame 33 is a keyframe. It's just a physical change in location from the move all, or on the move all. And now this is a hold. And now I'm going to start that anticipation. So I'm on frame 39. Typically, a move is either 6 frames, 8 frames, 10 frames, 12 frames. I keep my keyframes evenly spaced. So for this antic, let's go 8 frames here. Insert a key. And now I'm going to start to affect this pose. And really what the pose change is, he's standing here, observing, and he's just going to come back a little bit. Building that tension, so then we can go in the direction we want. So let's do that together. I'm going to pull this leg back. And we're just going to start posing that idea. And at the beginning, I think moving quickly, just to see if your idea is working, is better. So I'm not going to spend too much time on each pose, and then I'm going to see how it plays together, and then I'm going to go back, refine the pose, and then refine the timing and everything else. So here's that antic back, nice and simple for now. I'm going to spend more time on this second pose here, but let's keep going. Let's keep going and seeing if our idea is working. So we're going from one idea, one pose. I like to call my poses typically ideas, or even my framings ideas, because what I'm doing when I'm saying an idea is I'm communicating something to the audience. This pose, this framing is an idea. By moving my pose, by changing the pose, I'm inserting a new idea. And I find that when you're creating shots from scratch, or even if you're following storyboards or anything, what you're doing is you're communicating an idea. And typically a shot has one idea. In this case, this shot, the only purpose of this shot is to have that character jump out of frame. That's the idea. That's the point of the shot. And the more information I put into the shot, I have to make sure that it's communicating that one idea. This character is jumping out of this shot. And then this idea within the greater span of the shot is an anticipation. Am I selling the idea that this body, this character is trying to build some tension to go the other way? So that's why I call, to me, everything is an idea. This pose change, am I communicating the right idea? So you'll see me go back and forth between those two words, posing, idea, framing, idea. I'm going to insert a key. So I'm going from one pose to another, one idea to another, and then I need a hold. I need a little bit of a hold. And in that time, we're going to have a settle. This hold just allows the viewer to see your idea, your posing, so we can read it. And all this is 6 frames right here. And then we're going to go into another movement, another idea. Okay? So, and then you can see once I refine the pose, I'm just going to copy it to the other one. And then I'm going to work on my breakdown keys, then the settle into this last key here. We have the beginnings of an anticipation. Now we got to start going forward. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to switch up my workflow a little bit and work straight ahead. So here over these 2 keyframes, I was just going pose to pose, one idea to another. Now I'm still doing that, one idea to another, but I'm working straight ahead. It's going to be easier to get that character into that squash and out. So let's do that together and see what that looks like. I'm on frame 53. I'm going to go to frame 61, 8 frames, and start moving my character forward. He's going to take a little bit of a step forward here, and I'm going to be nice and rough. Again, it's more, is everything working together? And when I pose things, definitely the COG usually is the control that's working the hardest. And even on a small move, I'll move the COG, because you can see when I move the COG, it moves everything in the body. So even on a small pose change, I'll move the COG a little bit. That ensures every part of the body has a bit of movement then I can focus in on other parts of the body that need attention for that pose change. But the COG always has a little bit of movement, at least. Okay, we have this antic, he's holding, he's going to come forward, and already that forward movement, I want to come a bit lower. Just by scrubbing, I can see the path. So I'm just going to come forward more, back and down. He's building a little bit of antic, even again. And now I'm going to go 4 frames, insert a key. And I'm going to be very rough at this stage. He pushes off that leg. Something like this. This leg is now going to come off. Come on. And I'm just being very rough about my blocking. You can see how strange it might even look. Cool. Insert a key on everything. I insert a key on everything all the time. Well, not all the time, but when I'm blocking, I'll select everything, insert a key. Okay, let's go 4 more frames. A to select all. Another nice reason for just kind of the straight ahead is I find it a little more organic as well. Working rough and straight ahead to build some action sometimes. Okay, let's again pull that COG. And now he's going to start to contact its other main jumping off spot. I'm thinking about, so my posing, I'm also thinking about spacing, but in a rough way. Spacing is just the distance between the controls or the different body parts over time. The nice thing about working rough is you haven't committed much time. So if it's not something that's working for you, you don't feel like you've sunk an hour into your work or 2 hours, and then the idea of redoing it is harder to swallow. So working rough and maybe spending 8 minutes, 10 minutes blocking out a whole action, seeing if it's valid, is a better use of your time. Oh, come on. Come on. Cool. By now, these arms are going to start to swing back. And you can see, even though I'm laying keys pretty close to each other, once I go back in, if one of the keys, this middle one, isn't working for my arms, I can delete those and rework the arc. So that's why I'm not too precious. But here I can already tell that the arms are going to start to swing back in preparation for that final anticipation. 4 more frames, 73, and this is my main contact pose now. This leg is going to go on the ground, so what I'm going to do is Alt-R, reset the rotation, and Alt-G. Just so it's on the ground. Boop, and I'll slide it forward. Cool, I'm going to get this leg close to the platform, or the edge of the platform. This is going to be the leg that's really going to push off at the end. I'm going to Alt-R. I like to reset values quite a bit sometimes, especially over bigger pose changes. And thinking about it now, maybe the opposite leg would have been nice. So his back leg, his left leg to be forward, right leg to be back, just so we get a better silhouette from this angle. But all that tells me is maybe I'll change the camera. I'm not going to go ahead and change the pose. It's easier to change the camera. I've committed to my pose for now because I don't want to go back. But you can see from this angle, this leg is blocking the back leg. By orbiting the camera even a little bit, we get that silhouette. So that's an easy fix there. But I'm aware of it, just even at this stage, looking at it from this camera angle. And now I'm going to spend a little more time on this pose. This pose is important. Nice and rough. I'm going to move this leg. I'm not worried about that it might slip from the other one because I'll affect that other keyframe. But yeah, this frame really is important. So let's take a look here. I want a nice C-curve. That's the goal here, a C-curve. So when I go into that next pose, it's a nice straight pose, and that contrast is going to look good. And then we just play with the timing. Once we have 2 nice poses to work with, I'm going to select the camera, hit F. And even maybe coming more forward on the line is nice. Already that looks better. So I'm going to do that. I was thinking I'd do more profile, and profile could be cool. Yeah, profile could be actually really cool. because we're going to see that action more clearly. Nice profile angle. And then when we cut to the third one, we can be more on the line. And that'll be a nice change instead of being on the line here, although I like that. Jumping out and essentially just pulling back. Yeah, let's keep it profile for now. This gap is definitely exaggerated just by seeing this empty space, so I like that better. Okay, let's do that. What we've done up to this point is we've added 2 cameras, and we're starting to block the character's action. And just even at this stage, I feel like the story's going to work. The idea, the blocking, the physicality is going to work. So without even committing now to the third shot, I have an idea what the third shot's going to be, what the action's going to look like. But I'm going to just refine the blocking of this action first and then the jump out before I move to the third shot. So I have everything selected, A to select all, insert a key, and let's refine the pose. And I have this pose here, it's the same, it's just a hold. Just going to come over 1 frame, insert a key. What I'm going to do now with these 2 keys is I'm going to refine one of them, refine the pose, and improve it any which way, mainly for clarity. Is it selling whatever idea I want to sell? In this case, him just looking at the gap and hopefully looking a little heroic. So I'm going to work on that idea, refine the pose, and then I'm going to flip back and forth between these 2 ideas, these 2 poses. And if this pose is better, I'll keep this one, delete this one, or just replace it. So pull him forward a little bit, and I really like that. And this gap can increase a little bit. And maybe what I'll even do is have the back foot more on its toes, like he's really looking at how big that gap is. Cool, I'm going to select my spine controls here. Cool, so I've already added some values there. I'm going to just pull that chest back a little bit. Awesome, and then the head as well. Just going to have it. Do I want to look down? And don't be afraid to translate controls as well. Just because our bones can't physically translate, they can pivot, they can rotate. But don't be afraid, especially for shoulders. When you need to, especially the back shoulder that's not viewed from that camera angle, you can really pull that shoulder back, rotate it, so then you get that nice silhouette from that angle on certain parts of the body. So hopefully your character rig is able to translate. This is all I'm doing, is refining the idea. So I've done the blocking pass. I now know it's working. Now I'm going to clean up the poses. So I might speed through this part. You can just see the time lapse essentially. But all I'm doing is refining the poses at this point, cleaning up those ideas. Cool, so I've just cleaned up my pose a little bit, and here's what I'm going to do. Use my arrow key, and you can see just going back and forth between those 2 poses, and already one is stronger. This was my original. This is the updated one. It's stronger because it's more clear. Okay, so I'm selecting A, inserting a key on all, and all I'm doing now is copying that key, Control C, Control V. And again, now I can refine it even more. So you can see how long posing can take. But when you block it, I think in the way that I was doing at the beginning, is I spent 5 minutes on about 6, 7, 8 poses, something like that. Are they working together? So I'm going to leave that pose where it is. I'm not going to spend more time on that now. Okay, so let's also paste it to this keyframe here. And I'll delete this one now. Just like I did over here, all I'm going to do now is go to this pose, copy this pose, paste this pose, and I will find it just like I did for here. So again, a bit of a time lapse here. All right, so I refined this anticipation pose, and here's what it looks like. So it's a little cleaner than before. And that's the whole idea. The idea is working. Now can we make it stronger? So here's what that looks like. Just flipping between them. If you hit up and down on your arrows, you go from keyframe to keyframe. If you go left and right, you just go frame by frame. So the next pose I'm going to work on is that final anticipation. This one is really important. This one I really want to exaggerate. And then I'll refine these little ones as I go. Like I said, these other ones aren't important. These ones really, what's important about these poses, I'll refine the silhouettes and everything, but it's the movement, it's the arc, it's the timing. That's more important about these poses here as we move through the movement. But the pose that we land on, that's the one we're going to refine. Let's do this one together. I'm going to hit A, select all, insert a key, just to make sure. And I go over one frame, and all I'm doing is copying that pose. Now I have something, even if I ever mess this pose up, basically I save a copy. But if I improve the pose, then I replace it. Okay, so you can just have a look at the action. The hands are by the side, he's looking over, I'm leaning back, hands are forward, and by the time I come in over here, I really want the hands up in this negative space. I want those hands looking like they're just about to swing forward and really help propel him forward. So I know I want that look. I want a stronger shape visually in the legs, and I really want that curve in the back and the spine. And then as for the head, I'm going to have it looking straight forward. That's where he's jumping. And maybe even the tail. The tail I'll leave for a second pass after I'm done with everything, but I can even imagine the tail maybe curling up somehow and also looking like it's holding tension. When you have an idea in your head, like I said, this one, I know I want the hands here. I'm not sure quite how I'm going to do it, but they have to be there because I think it's going to be stronger. So don't be shy about it and just do it. Just be like, boop. Just pose it in those ideas. And while you're doing it, you're thinking about, okay, I'm crashing, I'm doing this, how am I getting in that shape? But the idea is more important than right now how it's hooking up. You're thinking about how it's hooking up so you don't get any gimbal lock or any weird rotations. You're thinking about that. But like I said, the idea is more important than not doing it. So you can see how aggressive I'm being with the shoulders. And at this distance and the cloth material, the fabric, you just don't see that tearing. So that's why I'm not shy about it. Okay, and I'm probably going to move those papers out of the way. This hand's too high. I can see it being in this area. That shoulder really plays such an important part in having that hand in the screen space that I want it. Cool, I'm getting where I want to, so that's better. Right now, I'll leave it for now. I'm going to think about that spine as well. So I work on one spot, get it to roughly where I want, and I work on different aspects of the body that to me are important. And I kind of refine them all at once instead of focusing, in this case, on the one arm. And then what if I make changes to the spine or the legs? All of a sudden, that one arm I spent maybe 10 minutes on isn't working with the rest of the body. So I move something in the direction it needs to, and I refine other key areas of the body so that it's all working together. So I really want a nice C curve. And then I like how low he is to the ground. This hip control plays a big role. So you can see if I rotate it here, it kind of breaks that C, that shape. So I know I'm going to roll it down this way. And I feel like it also has to come back out. And then the legs, I think, can have much greater separation as well. Maybe not much greater, but just a little more. Maybe you almost don't even see any gap. That's how compressed our character is. Oh, that's nice too. And then he'll come forward. So just building that energy, storing that energy in this pose. Same with the head. I can just pull it back a little bit. I don't like to zoom in that close to my character. If I know my shot is this far away, I don't like to zoom in too close and worry about things that just won't be seen from that angle. So I'll zoom in a little bit, but that's why I don't go too close. I like to see it at about the framing that the viewer is gonna see it at. I'm gonna hit A, select all, insert a key, and now we can look at the two poses for that antic pose into the jump. And so this one is better. This one feels like he's storing more energy. So I like that idea. I'm going to copy this, Control C, Control V. So I'll keep doing that a couple times. And then what I can do as well is I'll move this keyframe over now, select these two, I, and go automatic. And you can see now I can use the computer. You can see how the computer elongates the shape a little bit. What's happening here is the information from this keyframe goes into this one and it overshoots. You can see this curve here, overshooting and coming back. So I use that information as well. First, I like to refine my pose as much as I can. Then I'll duplicate my pose, auto spline between them, and then use what the computer gives me as well. And all just to refine that pose, that idea. Cool. So here's what we have so far. We've worked on 3 poses. That first initial standing pose, that antic back, and then that last compression pose where he's about to jump forward. So we refined those 3 poses, and we have about 4 poses in between as well, helping define the action. What I'm going to do now is work on that next extreme pose where he's stretching to jump, and then we'll work on the exit. Then we'll go back and start adding some breakdown keys. We're going to have a small little settle here. So as we come in here, we're going to have a settle. It might only be 2 frames until we start to move into the next key. So A to select all, insert a key. I'm just going to go 2 frames for now, insert a key. I'm going to go 4 frames over now. From 75, I'm going to go to 79, insert a key, and work on that stretch. So now I've spent maybe a good 5 minutes, 8 minutes on this pose. And now I'm going to spend 30 seconds, a minute on the stretch pose, see if that idea is working, and then again I'll refine it. Okay, so these are going to be the most 2 extreme poses. The change between them is the most extreme. So I'm really going to help that along. You can see I'm pulling that COG. Usually I start there. And now what I'm going to do is just reset some of these values. I've selected the hip control and the spine controls here. In Blender, you can do Alt-R, Alt-G just to reset it. In Maya, you can just go to your attributes and reset the values. Or use your picker. Let's do the same for the head. Just reset the values. And let's do the same basically for most of the body parts. So this foot was the last one on the ground. This foot can start to come up. So I'm just going to also start to pose that. And when we jump forward, we have our arms that swing forward, that help the momentum go forward. We have the push of the legs, but then the leg itself can also swing forward a little bit as well. So this one that's going to leave the ground first is going to start to come up a little bit. But that's the idea. I'm not too worried about the details yet. Cool. So it is going to work. It is looking good. And I do want even more stretch than what I have now. So I'll do that. But for now, I'll keep it as is. Give myself a little more time here. Cool. And we'll just get him out of the shot. I think I want even just a tad higher. Cool. 79, and then maybe 6 frames here, just to get him fully out. Insert a key, and I'm just going to grab the foot control, COG, and woo, pull him out a little bit. Affect the shape a little bit. So here, he's going to start to rotate over a little bit. I think we can still get a little more height. And we'll straighten these legs out a bit. Cool. And maybe what I'll do when I do clean up this idea is working 6 frames, my spacing to be 6 frames. I don't like that as much because that means the middle is 3 frames. I like to work on even. So I set my keyframes on odd numbers, and my spacing is even, but I like to go 2 frames, 4 frames, 8 frames, and right now it's 6 frames. So when I go back in, I'll probably lay key on 83. It's just easier for me to space out that way. But let's just do 89 for now, and I'm just working rough. Awesome, so it's nice to see basically the blocking of this idea, of this shot. This might be a good place to show, if you're working in a production, to show someone, hey, is this idea working? This is a good first pass just to submit, get it in the cut, and see if it's working. Get some notes before you commit more time. Cool. So it is working. Now let's go in and refine things even more and start adding the breakdowns and finish up this animation. I'll finish up this shot. We'll go into the third one, and then I'll probably make that video, or that portion of the video, a little quicker. But it's basically the same thing we're doing here. The more complex thing, and I'll spend a bit of time in that one, the more complex aspect of the third shot is going to be the roll. You'll see how I go about that. I'll just be brutal about it. Pose, kind of like we did here. Pose coming into that landing. The roll, being very brutal about it. And then spending a lot of time on that final pose. But everything in between there, those 6-8 frames, are going to happen quick. I'm not worried about crashing that much. Just worried about the movement and if it's working all together. Okay, so let's do some breakdown keys. Here's what we're going to do. We're back at the start of the second shot, and we're going to do a breakdown and settle together. Basically, it's just a simple formula. Pose, pose, you're going to have some breakdown keys, and then you're going to add a settle. And then same thing in here. Pose, pose. The only difference is now you're not going to have a settle because it's moving between keyframes. But you're still going to have some breakdown keys. Okay? So we have an idea, frame 39, 8 frames later on 47, we have the next idea. In between here, we're going to add some keys on different parts of the body to define some of the arc and delay some of that action. And you'll see as we get closer to the head, typically the head's more important, we're going to add a little more movement on the head and put the breakdown key closer to the end of the action. That way when it comes into the settle, the portion on the whole body, the head portion, is going to have the most movement. And by having the most movement, your eye is drawn to that part of the body. Let's start with the COG. Select the COG. Come on. And for the COG, right in the middle here is 43. I might come sometimes a little before that or right on 43. One important thing too in this action that you can see is we have both feet moving. This back foot is going to be the more important one as it's being planted, but this front foot is also moving. So before we do the COG, let's just take care of that. I'm going to copy this, Control C, maybe come 3 frames over, Control V. That foot is going to stay planted on the ground. We can't have both feet moving at the same time. Maybe even 4 frames. So it's planted on the ground, and then it's going to come up. This foot is the opposite. Instead of delaying it, we're actually going to have it come into its pose sooner. So what I'm doing is Control C, copying this pose, and maybe coming 4 frames, and Control V. So now it's planted on the ground. You can see each leg moves at its own timing. And then we can refine that. But that's important when you have a pose change and you have 2 feet moving. That's okay. They just something's got to be planted in order to allow us to push off and take the weight. Okay, let's go back to our COG and add a breakdown key. This breakdown key is going to be very simple. Let's go 43 right in the middle, and all we're going to do is pull it down. That's the simplest breakdown key, even that much. I'm going to pull it down a little more, And here's what I'm talking about by delaying some of the movement, the spacing. We're adding a little more movement to the backside. So I just pulled it down to create the arc. So instead of going in a straight line from one idea to another, one pose to another, the breakdown key, I pulled it down, it creates an arc. And doing it on the COG ensures that everything on the body gets a little arc. So I just pulled it down. I'm also going to pull it forward a little. By pulling it forward, I'm making the beginning a little slower and the end a little faster. I'm also going to add a little rotation down. That's it. Oops. Insert a key. And that's it. That's the breakdown for the body. And what happens when you have maybe a heavier character or more complex action, you can even start to think about that the breakdown key needs to actually take place a little bit over this foot, not much, because we're pushing off that foot. And then it comes over the other foot. But here, being from a profile, no one sees it, so I'm not too worried about how the weight is distributed, but know that you can also treat it that way. I'm not going to add too much movement really to the rest of the body. I'm going to add a little bit of delay on the hands, so when the wrist comes up, there's just a little more movement there. Might add a little bit of the fingers opening, and the head just a little breakdown up. In this case too, he's looking this way. Maybe I even inverse the breakdown. Maybe the chin gets delayed and it just comes down the other way. I'll do a little bit on the shoulder. Let's see, what's the shoulder doing? Just coming forward. You're just not going to see much. There's not much point to do too much and overcomplicate some of these things. The simpler, usually the better. But a little bit of breakdown, you can see I'm adding more in the hand there. Insert a key, and then I'm going to come to my wrist here. Go one frame over. So by getting closer to the end of the action, I'm adding more movement to that part of the body. Okay, I like that. So the fingers were in a fist here, and now they're open. All I'm going to do is add a little bit of delay. They're opening the whole time. I'm just going to keep it closed a bit more so then the fingers have more movement on them. And most likely this index finger is going to have more of that movement. This rig I found for some reason, and maybe just the way I'm working, normally I'll select all the fingers and rotate them at the same time, but it doesn't seem like that's working for this rig, so I'm not sure. So it's a little slower doing them one by one. One of the things I found, because I've been animating now professionally for 17 years, almost, 16, 17 years, and a good 10, 11 years I spent as an animator. The last 5, 6 years moved into layout. And one of the nice things about moving into a different department and focusing on different aspects of filmmaking is I don't spend as much time posing anymore. I get to the idea quicker because as I stepped away from animation and focused more on cameras and filmmaking, I realized how unnecessary some of the things we do in animation are. We can spend hours posing for something that's not really important. So it's important if you are an animator to understand that it doesn't matter how beautiful you make things look if the viewer doesn't even see it. So don't go spending, don't overdo it with detail that's just not going to be seen. I remember when I was first starting out, maybe my first year, I literally spent 4 hours on one pose and just thinking about, is the pinky better here or here? And, just a lot of time wasted. So, yes, you don't need, not everything is important. Let's put it that way. Let's go to the head now, and we'll do the breakdown there as well. So I'm going to do the reverse, just to lay the chin up a little, and it's going to come down. Okay? So now we can scrub. Nice and simple. And what I can do after is once I've done the breakdown, which defines the arc, I'm going to do the settle now, and it's just going to it's basically going to add an ease into that pose that we're going into. And then I'll then focus on the feet again, that step. Maybe that step needs to come up a little and hit harder. So that's a secondary thing, is I'm just scrubbing near the end. And I'm deciding where I want to insert a key. I'm going to select all. And you can see what we have going on here. This is our first pose, frame 39, second pose, and these two keys, which have a couple things, maybe like 6, 7 things keyed on the body, minus the different fingers. This is our breakdown. And now I'm scrubbing over, and I'll probably insert a key on frame 45. So everything's selected, all the controls. I'm just going to hit I. I'm going to grab this keyframe, G, and move it over for now, maybe just to frame 51. So here's what we have in the graph editor. It's just being pulled. And if I scrub, it basically just adds a little cushion to that move. And that's important. It helps the viewer just see the movement a little better. What I like to do in Blender here is I have this keyframe selected. I'm going to hit Control, deselect the key itself and the handle on the right, leaving me just the handle on the left. G and X, I can pull that handle. And you want to pull it so that settle is even stronger. It's not as floaty. What we can do as well, I'm going to just delete this keyframe here, 53, and just bring this over 53, so it's just a long settle. Okay, let's just keep going with the action. But you can see how we're building it. Pose, pose, and we're defining all the action. And now we're adding some breakdown keys and settles, going block by block now. So I just cleaned up a little bit of the footwork in those middle keys there. And now let's work on the last bit where he gets into his antic, that squash pose, and then that jump. So I'm going to select everything and just work my way to that section. A in the graph editor, period numpad, just to see everything. And here's that hold. You can see it over here in the timeline. So I'm just going to move everything over. We're coming into that pose. Nice. And on an action like this, typically that last frame, I'll also start to craft as I get there. And that way I'm just adding a little bit of drag as we get into that pose. Not too much. Cool. Just adding a little bit of drag, and then this foot, the one that's going to land last, can just be a little more noticeable. Not much. Cool. A to select all, insert a key. And then here's that frame. So we're ready to start adding a settle. But before we do, I also want a pose that gets us into the squash, or that gets us kind of out of the squash into the jump. So that's what this area is for. I'm going to start working on the breakdown here, favoring this key here. So it's only 4 frames between these two poses. So I'm going to start working on the breakdown, but favoring this key. And so the breakdown, instead of going in a straight line from here to where it is somewhere in this area, the breakdown is going to hold longer down. So we'll start with the COG, and all I'm going to do is pull that COG down. It's still going to stay down longer. And so now the arc, instead of going point A, point B, it arcs down a little bit. And then when we jump, we're able to jump higher. And with any action, I find it simplest when I work on the feet first. This foot needs to be on the ground for this long, and you can just kind of get a sense of the timing that way, just by keeping the feet on or off the ground. And then it's easier to understand which way the COG needs to go. So this foot needs to stay on the ground longer. All I'm going to do is copy that pose, Control C and Control V. Now I can have control over it staying on the ground. And I'm just going to pull it over one more frame. You can see how easy that is. And even over here maybe. And on that frame 76, I'll craft a pose just for that one frame. So 2 frames of a hold. And maybe even this back leg can be held 1 frame. So I can select the 2 controls that deal with the foot, Control C, Control V. And already that's going to help. That feels much better already. Cool, so here's where we're at right now with the first shot again. I'm going to add a little track screen right to the camera in the second shot, and then we'll do the third shot together as well. I'll go a little quicker on that one so this demo isn't too long. Make sure everything is keyed on the camera. Insert a key, perfect. And I'm also gonna insert a key on our focal length, frame 83, and now we can frame for the new camera. So over the cut, I'm going to cheat the character up a little bit. So he's going to be in this negative space, come in an arc a little bit still, and then come land here, low to the ground. So this framing, I have an idea that this is generally the framing that I want, but I don't have the specific yet until I get the character landing, rolling, and into that nice hero pose here. So I'm just going to keep the camera here for now, and then affect the camera as the action gets closer. Just pull that up. It looks much better in that screen space here. I'm going to use this empty screen space as well. He's going to come something like this, something forward, roll in this area, and then land in a cool hero pose right in front of the camera. That'll look good. So now that I'm in this new shot, I'm going to update the character's pose from this new angle. Just resetting my control just so I know what's going on. Now that stretch that I had the character stretched in the last shot is no longer important. So I'm just resetting all those values. All right, so I've cleaned up the pose here, and let's start moving through space. I'm going to be nice and brutal about it, and I might even have it be 12 frames for my landing. I'm selecting the COG and the foot control. Just bring him forward. And so this pose now has to be angled down because he's coming up and then he comes back down. So all I'm going to do is just rotate that body down and then drag the feet back up. Just like that. So the character is getting ready for the landing. So those arms and shoulders are going to stretch forward as much as they can. And I am going to work on the landing pose itself, the contact pose. And I'm going to have the character roll over his left shoulder. So not just a front roll, but more of a side roll. And that means I'm going to have the contact for the left hand be a little more forward. Awesome. So here's the idea of this contact pose with the hand. Insert a key. And now let's come on over here, select these two keys, and we're going to say vector. So you just come in like that. I'm going to shorten this up a little, and we're just going to play it. We're going to get a sense of if the timing is correct, if it feels good. Cool, and I think it is. I'm going to give it a little bit more time because it is a cool idea. Just 2 more frames. There we go. So frame 83, somewhere around 89 is where 87, 89 is where we're going to reach the peak of height, and then we're going to start to come down. So I'm going to select the foot and the COG, and we're just going to pull this character back up. That's the breakdown, defining that arc. Cool. So you can see how the character is still coming up, which is going to help with the second shot. Cut that in nicely, and then he comes down. Here what I'm going to do is every 4 frames, back to that. Every 4 frames, even sometimes every 2 frames, I'm just going to roll that character very rough into that action, into the roll action, so we can get into that cool hero moment. And that's what I'm after. So I'm going to select everything, go for 4 frames over, 99, insert a key. So that mass is still moving forward, so all I'm going to do is pull that forward and down. Cool. Something like that. And already his head is tucking. So we're just going to be very, very rough here. Tuck that head, and I'm going to reset the value. Already it wants to reset. And when you tuck your head, really, your chin goes right into your chest. And we're going over this shoulder, over his left shoulder. You can see how mangled the pose starts to get because you're getting into a difficult shape That's okay. I'm going to pull him forward. And so already his head is being protected. So what the hands do in a roll like this is protect the head, help take that weight. And really all you're looking for in one of these big actions is just to get out of that momentum and protect the body. So the head roll, the head tuck is part of it, and the hands going over the shoulder is going to be the other part of it. He's going to be on his back now. So you can see I'm going to just roll him over like this. Somewhere over there. I'm not going to even worry about the hands. Now it's more about the legs. Coming over. Kind of just tucking like a little ball. When you get into funky shapes like this, yeah, just pose it out very rough. Just like that. We spent a good 20 seconds there. I'm not even going to worry about the hands, just to see if the idea is working. Bring him forward again as he's getting out of the roll. Cool. Always that momentum is moving him forward. And now he's gonna, this one leg is gonna tuck under him. But we're just gonna pull that CLG, see how he's just rolling over, that's cool. And where are you, leg? And then this one leg is gonna be on the ground. He's gonna use this one leg, his right leg, to help himself up. Just kind of tucks under him. Really kind of funky. Let's reset some of these controls. So let's just play what we have for now. So you can see, even with the terrible posing, it doesn't really matter when it comes to really fast action, because I, as a viewer, buy it. And then it's going to be that last pose that we're going to spend a good 4 or 5 minutes making it look good. And he's going to take the weight. So we're going to have an overshoot pose, and then he takes the weight. Maybe a look back, I'm not sure. And then he'll just exit. So now it's just about making this pose look cool. I'm going to reset some of the values on these controls, make sure it's not giving me anything funky. One of the nice things too that's forgiving on such a big action like I just did the roll is even if you have weird gimbal lock, you can hide it over such a fast action, and then you can reset the pose essentially through the action the right way to work with this last pose. So I'm going to clean this pose up, I know that. Let's update our framing now. Normally I'll do it through this window, but here I'll just pull this camera, tab out to get out of my pose mode, and I'm just going to go in, select the camera, and affect my framing here from this window. So I might even have a longer FOV if I'm going to go in on his face more. Oh yeah, that's going to look good. We're not even going to show the contact. We'll show the contact of him rolling on the ground, but we'll end it in this nice mid shot. And we'll see that gap there as well. I think that's looking really cool. I'm going to add a little bit of a camera move. And the camera move is going to finish just after he finishes his action. Currently, right now, the pose ends on 107. But I know I'm going to have a little settle and an overshoot. So my camera move is going to end more around 109, 110, and then with a settle 120. Something like that. I can already tell the camera move is going to need more time for the settle, but we'll do that after. So here's that pose. I've spent a good couple minutes, 3-4 minutes, refining the pose with the techniques you've seen in the past, where I duplicate the pose, improve the pose, and also copy the pose and add a spline between them, and let the computer also push the pose, exaggerate it a little bit. And now what I like to do is actually pose my... It depends on the action. In this case, it's a more aggressive action. And so that overshoot, and the overshoot, what that is when there's a big action, you don't just come to a stop. You come to a stop, but you your momentum takes you a little further than you normally would, and then you come back to your final pose. So that overshoot is that pose that goes past where you think you'd stop. So you're taking that weight and then you come back. So I'm going to key the overshoot as a pose. So I'm going to select all, insert a key, and I'm going to treat frame 107 as my overshoot and go 4 frames to frame 11. And that's going to be my final resting pose. And in between here, I'm also still going to have a settle. So I'm going to go to frame 107, and now I know the pose I'm getting into. All I have to do is push the pose past this point. So that's my overshoot, and then I come back. Just like most of these poses, we're going to start with the COG, and all we're going to do is pull it forward. His momentum after the roll is still going this way, and he has to catch himself, use his muscles, and then push himself back. So you can see all I'm doing is pushing him forward a little, rotating him down. So we're coming out of this roll, into this pose, and then back into that settle. So that's my overshoot pose, and then that's the pose that I worked on. It's easier to work on this pose and then do the overshoot, because this is our final resting pose. I'm going to leave it there for this demo, and I'm going to work a bit more on the secondary animation, things like the ears, the paper in the back, and the scarf in his tail. Clean that up and polish it a bit. I'm also going to try to sell the idea that there's wind blowing and he's on top of this mountain, and so just that feeling I think will be cool. So I'm going to give that a try. I'll give it a quick render, and then I'll come back with the final result. Alright, so here's the final result. I added some secondary animation to the character, the tail, the ears, and the paper. I also added the flag in the scene from Sketchfab to help sell the idea of the wind. I hope you liked the video and got some value from it. If you did, please like it so that I know this content is useful. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.